In terms of managing production risk, I think I'd mentioned before that one of the things you can do is diversify. The problem with most greenhouses in New Jersey, I think, is we tend to over-diversify. So there's a nice balance, because if you do kind of like the Dutch growers and you only grow one crop in your whole greenhouse, that can be very efficient as far as labor management and so forth. But if somebody decides that they're not going to buy tulips this year, or you get hit with a disease that wipes out your whole greenhouse, there's some risk there. So that's why we say more than one crop helps helps minimize that risk, because you're spreading it over different things. The same thing with if you have stocks, having different stocks. But I think we tend to be plants people in the greenhouse, in the floral business anyway, and so we grow so many things that it's hard to be efficient, because if you go, a few of this and a few of that, then you can't automate. So I would say look at that, and maybe some things that you do best, do those, and then consider buying some products from someone else to fill in some of the mix that you need, especially if you're small. But one of the things that we always say is diversify, but in New Jersey I hesitate to say that. Crop insurance is something that is available for nurseries now. It didn't used to be. I don't think it's available for plugs, but I remember when it first came out, it was a 500 and something page document, so a lot of crops are available. And the government is not just giving money for disasters anymore. They expect you to buy crop insurance if you lose your crop. I mean, the good thing about greenhouse crops, for the most part, they're less than a year, so if you lose the crop, you can recover. It's not like orchards where you've got a huge number of years invested, but it's still a huge loss. You've got high value crops in there. So I would consider looking at crop insurance. It's in the new farm bill. It is subsidized in terms of what you pay in versus how much is paid out. It may not work. You hope that you don't have to collect on it. That's really what it is insurance, but it's something definitely to take a look at to reduce your production risk. And then in terms of technologies, because probably your biggest cost is labor, so if you can look at ways of automating, that will help you get more production out of your greenhouse. So when you want to start a new enterprise, what are the relationships between the existing enterprise and a possible new one? And hopefully they complement each other. Are there markets for that product? Are they the same markets? Or are you looking at a different market? Sometimes the way of diversifying is going into a different market. Are you going to need more labor, or can you more effectively use the labor? CubePack was talking about, you have a high overhead cost in a greenhouse, so you're constantly trying to keep that greenhouse filled so you can spread that overhead cost over more crops. And also you can keep your labor employed all year. What about additional capital investments if you're going to grow a new crop? Is there something different that you need for that versus what you have already? And what about knowledge and skill? I guess that's part of why you're all here, to learn as much knowledge as you can. And I know some of you are coming to the course on Friday. And we have, I think, almost 40 people signed up for that hydroponic greenhouse class already. So things are always changing, and so keeping abreast of technology, management, crop production, and so forth is always useful. Okay, in terms of crop insurance, what amount of coverage do you need? The catastrophic is available, but if you did have a loss, that's not going to cover a huge amount. So you might want to look at more than catastrophic and look at the pros and cons of that. If you had a total loss, could you still, and you took the catastrophic insurance, could you make your payments on your debt obligations, and would you have enough for family living expenses? Those are things you need to think about. And how much does the crop insurance cost? Okay, when you're looking at new technologies, I know a lot of people are going more and more to insect predators, and this becoming, I guess, something that a lot of greenhouses are doing, and it's more effective now. Are the costs of doing that lower than the current system? And look at the unintended consequences too. I know years ago I was working with predators in orchards, and one of the things that happened is we were doing a lot of broad spectrum chemicals before, and when you do predators, they usually only attack one specific insect. So all these minor pests that weren't a problem before suddenly became a major problem because the predators didn't attack them. So, you have to plan for that as well, or at least adjust when that comes along. So, this is a picture from, I think I told you I've been working in Turkey for the last 4 years, mostly with vegetable greenhouse growers, and these are what the people there considered peasant farmers. They're very intelligent. They've been doing this for a long time. They understand how to grow, and I think until we had our class, sadly they were thinking, well, I want to send my kids to college and get them off the farm, whereas we're sort of going the opposite way here. But one of the things that they're very proud of is when you're in a greenhouse, you're confined, and if you're growing things like tomatoes, you need air movement or something to pollinate the plant, so they're bringing in bees as pollinators. So this is considered high tech for them, and there's different ways of doing that. You can shake the plants, but bees are much more efficient. So there's people that sell the beehives to bring in.
Into the greenhouse. Into
the greenhouse, right. And just like you said with the ladybugs, I think you have to replace them every so often. So you have to look at the economics of the new technology. Would it reduce your risks? And is there one risk management strategy that's more profitable than another? And what about buying crop insurance? Sometimes you can look at alternatives that maybe if you do one thing, it would reduce your risk, but you can also look at crop insurance as an alternative, or you could do both. Okay, so in terms of a production plan, this is probably one of the easier parts for you to do because we all like to grow plants. So we think about what crops am I going to produce, what techniques am I going to use. Hydroponics was mentioned, for example. What technology and equipment, and this lets us buy the toys we like, but you also need to look at only buying the technology and equipment that really makes money in terms of the business. And also varieties, like tomatoes. I know that's a big thing in greenhouses now, and do you want to go with the hybrids or do you want to do the heirlooms? The heirloom seems to be sort of a niche market right now that a lot of people are looking for, and they're very tasty. But there's a reason that we went to hybrids because of vigor and so forth. So there's trade-offs there. And do you have other farm-related activities that complement what you're doing, like a booth at a farmer's market, or maybe if you have a sprayer, you may do spraying for other people. Maybe you could be an IPM consultant and sell beneficial insects to other growers and so forth. So there's complementary things that you could do. You have a handout. I don't know if everybody picked it up, called Production Records. And this isn't specifically part of a business plan at all, but it's one of the things that you need to do to run your business. And it's also one of the more popular items that we've come up with is, especially with all the regulations, everything you do for your crop, you need to keep records of. So I just try to make a simple form here of, the task that you're doing, who did it, the quantity, the date, and how much time. So you're keeping records of all your production tasks and also the time. And this has been maybe not this particular sheet, but these kind of records have been very useful for growers. For example, if your neighbor accuses you of spraying pesticide that kills their flowers, and you have documentation of what you sprayed, and none of those things do that, that's going to hold up hopefully you won't go that far, but if you had to, deal with a court case or something like that. Also with traceability now, with any products, especially food that comes out of your greenhouse, if something happens, you've got records that you've done everything the way you should do, what you did it, when you did it. And also if something does go wrong, you've got the records to see, well, here's what I did, maybe this is where it went wrong. Okay, so it's you may not want to use this particular sheet, but you need some kind of production record keeping, maybe even a smartphone application, but something to keep track, especially when you're dealing with any kind of chemicals at all, but in terms of labor as well, especially if you're starting out, this will give you some idea of how much you're spending on each task. Okay, so one of the things you need to do for your business plan, I know several of you are working on ag plan, is a production plan. And if you go all through the notebook, the business planning workbook, we're talking about Mrs. Greenjeans' greenhouse, and we say that she's a small nursery located in Anywhere, USA. We purchased the business last year, and the previous owner only grew bedding plants, but we want to develop year-round production. Again, the same thing that Cube Pack mentioned is you've got this overhead, you want to keep it utilized all year. So they sell primarily to retail garden centers. We hope to increase production and sales over the next 5 years by using existing space more efficiently. And the existing head house is the staging area for planting and preparing plants for delivery. It also has storage capacity for containers, chemicals, fertilizers, bags of growing media. And so the following table gives our production and price projections for each of the crops for the next 5 years. We plan to work closely with our county agent in IPM use as much as possible. So here's what they plan to have is bedding plants, hanging baskets, perennials in different sizes of poinsettias, which would keep their greenhouse occupied pretty much year-round.